Hey, welcome back to Not Your Therapist. This is the podcast where we talk about life's mess, magic, and everything in between. I'm your host, Kayla Riley. I'm a licensed therapist. I grew my practice from the ground up, and now it's a successful practice here in North Carolina. I'm a mama, and I'm a cycle breaker in chief. Today's episode's for anyone who's been through a divorce, is navigating one now, or grew up in the fallout of their parents' messy-ass split. I'm talking with the legendary Dr. Larry Waldman, PhD in psychology, former private practice psychologist in Phoenix, Arizona, and a forensic psychologist with decades of experience in the family court system. For the last 20 years of his career, Dr. Waldman was the one that judges called in during high conflict divorces to assess families, make recommendations on custody, and he always did it with the kids' best interests at heart. I honestly wish every single court system had someone like Dr. Waldman. I definitely know that they don't have that here in North Carolina, or they didn't back when my parents got divorced. Let's be real, when immature adults are fighting over money and custody, the biggest casualties are the children, and no parent means to do that intentionally to their children. I've seen it in my personal life. My parents went through a messy divorce. I've seen it over and over again in my career. I've helped many parents walk this walk, either during the divorce or afterwards, trying to kind of correct the emotional wounds that they left their kids, even though they didn't mean to. It's a very painful experience. And I've also seen it again and again with therapists that I mentor and support in my practice, because it just happens all the time. In this episode, we're going to get real about what not to do during a divorce or after a divorce if you don't want to mess your kids up. And more importantly, how to do it better. We talk about emotional wounds, bad boundaries, parentification, estrangement, and anxiety disorders that often stem from being caught in the middle. And even if you're not a divorced parent, I want you to listen, especially if you're an adult child of divorce. This conversation is going to give you so much insight, clarity, and validation around what you might have experienced growing up. Also, can I just say that Dr. Waldman is a gem? Like, I low-key want him to be my grandpa. Let's get to it. What do you see as the difference between a healthy divorce and more of a toxic divorce?
One, of course, is the major difference. Of course, is the ongoing conflict. Unfortunately, for about 20% of couples going through divorce, once the paperwork is filed and they're officially separated, it doesn't end. In fact, sometimes it's like just the beginning. It appears, and I have accused a number of people over the years, that they want a divorce and they want to seek revenge, if you will, or martyrdom, if you will. Look what I put up with, and
Yeah,
unfortunately,
I
that
think that's
doesn't,
very, very true.
yeah, it doesn't go down well, and so the fighting continues, and as I said. Often, if you're doing that, the kids are dragged through it as well, and that is very troublesome, and it's essentially traumatic to the children. They didn't ask for it unless they're maybe preteens or teenagers, and they know a little more. It's a shock to them. Remember, kids are born, as I like to say, naked and naive. What they see in their home, as far as they're concerned, is their reality.
Yeah,
They don't know if it's good, bad, or indifferent. I mean,
right.
as far as they're concerned, this happens everywhere,
Yeah.
whatever. And then one day, they see. They have that fateful meeting in the living room where Dad is sitting there with his luggage, and he's leaving, and it like blows them out of the water.
Yeah.
And they have lots of questions and lots of fears, and so on. And unfortunately, it doesn't end there.
And what about, so I know that from my perspective, a therapeutic perspective, I see a lot of damage done when one parent kind of badmouths the other parent, either in front of the kids or to the kids. Could you talk about that? Like, why is it so tempting from a parent's perspective, and from a child's perspective, how does that really impact them?
Well, that's there's a number of sins, if you will, that parents in this in these situations commit. If and you know, and certainly um, alienation is right up there. You know, speaking badly about the other parent, to the kid. What it does, you see, is it really puts the child in a awkward position. Um, who are they supposed to believe? Who are they supposed to be loyal to? Remember, up until that fateful day when the separation actually occurred, as far as the child was concerned, they had the two best parents in the world. They had the best mom in the world, they had the best dad in the world, and their parents had the best marriage in the world, because that's all they only knew. Now, all of a sudden, the best mom in the world, just saying, and it happens both ways, the best mom in the world is making critical comments about the best dad in the world. What? Why? What happened? As far as the kid's concerned, the world is turned upside down. Black is white, white is black, and so on and so forth. And the kids are caught in what we refer to as a loyalty squeeze.
Mm.
Where, who are they to be? Who are they to remain loyal to? And so on. It's very hard. It really shakes them to the core. And parents do this because they're angry. They probably, by the time they're divorced, have said every bad word they can think of numerous times. So there's nothing else to say. But if they can use the kids against, or the kid against the other parent, aha, that's a new weapon. And they do that. Frankly, it's selfish. It's immature, but it's done, and it is damaging to kids, very much so. Many times, kids caught in these situations, their schoolwork drops off. They become depressed themselves. They stop being social. They become irritable. They stop eating, sleeping, and so forth. Lots of issues occur. Now, having been in this field for decades, I've seen the end of this. And what happens many times is one of the parents is, and I don't want to demean moms, but it happens more with moms than dads, primarily because the kids typically are spending more time with mom than with dad.
Yeah.
But dads do it too. That's for sure. Okay. So what happens, though, is there comes a time in their child's adolescence, or maybe even young adulthood, or it might even occur when the child themselves become a parent. Somewhere in there, from adolescence to that point, the kid gets the recognition, the realization that mom or dad manipulated me and kept me from the other parent. And then all hell breaks loose. I've seen it where a mom alienated a child and kept the child away from their father because the child said, well, I want nothing to do with him. He's a blah, 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 blah. and so on. But by the time he started college, the realization came, wait a minute here. My mom took advantage of me, and I wasn't allowed to have a relationship with his father, and the kid reversed the situation, strove to have a relationship with his father, and now cut off his mother.
Mm,
So the mother basically shot herself in the foot.
right.
Yes, she had the kid for 10 years all to herself, but not for the rest of her life.
Hmm.
So,
Well, and an undue burden on the child, right? Because
absolutely.
well, and what would you say to those moms who are saying, "Yeah, but he's a narcissist and he cheated on me and he wasn't there for, my kids, or he canceled last minute on the visitations all the time. Like I was trying to protect my child." What would you say to that parent?
Well, remember, you can be a lousy spouse and a decent parent, and that's what it is. I mean, now if we're talking true abuse,
Right.
okay, that's a different story. But most of the time, it's not. And the child deserves to have a relationship with the other parent, and so
Well,
on.
and I think that children should be allowed the dignity to discover who both parents are on their own terms and in their own time, right? So I think a lot of moms influence like, "Oh, well, I want them to see." And it's like, "Well, wait a second. That's not your journey. You had an opportunity to get to know both of your parents, and I think when you become an adult, you start to have new realizations and new insights about both of your parents, who they are as people. And there comes a reckoning for most of us. And most of us have to process this in therapy you know, or in our own relationships or whatever that environment is. However, if a parent robs you of that opportunity, what does that do to your identity and your you know, whether you think your co-parent is a good parent or not, you're not in control.
Absolutely. And I've heard it said, that of course, when one parent is criticizing the other parent of the child, that parent is literally criticizing 50% of that kid's genes.
Yes.
So that kid's being essentially criticized as well. By the way, to to add to this formula, if you will, what about the grandparents?
Interesting.
And being a grandparent, fortunately, my kids haven't gone through this, but I've worked with grandparents in this situation. There are also times where the parent who's doing the alienation, if you will, not only is cutting off the child from the other parent, but also from the other parent's parents.
Yeah.
And I've had situations, in fact, I've even been in court about that, where the grandparents had a lovely connection with the children, but following the divorce, the other parent, prevented that relationship to continue.
Yeah.
And and they went to court about it. And in
Well, and I
fact,
would even say that's true in the reverse. Like, I think a lot of grandparents talk a lot of smack about. So, like, if dad and mom split up, dad's parents inadvertently say a lot of negative comments about mom. And so I think they can be part of this equation as well on both sides. One, they can be alienated from the child, but also I think they can be the alienators.
absolutely. And as a parenting coordinator, many times I would have a session with the grandparents as well. And if there was, and you're right, that does happen. And I would make it very clear, if they want to maintain some kind of semblance of a relationship with their grandchild, they shut up.
Yes.
That if they're going to criticize, let's say mom in that case, while the kid is visiting them, then they're again they're harming themselves. Because I will ask, as a parenting coordinator, I had lots of authority, and I would meet with the kid and say, well, how was it with mom, grandpa and grandma and so forth? By the way, did they say anything about? And if I'm hearing that they are, I'll send a letter to the judge that, hey, I've warned the grandparents not to
Yeah.
do it. They're continuing to do it. These visitations should be limited or supervised.
What state are you in? Because I do not hear of a lot of psychologists being involved in these divorce cases to protect the kids' interests. I think it's wonderful.
Arizona, Maricopa County.
Okay,
By the
well,
way, Maricopa County is the divorce capital of the world.
no
Something to be,
kidding.
something to be proud of. More divorces are filed in Maricopa County than anywhere else in the nation.
Oh my gosh, that's sad. Well, that maybe that was why the courts involved psychologists. But I really think that all custody and divorce kind of situations could really use that service because there's so much damage done. And I think
Right.
a lot of times, I think parents give themselves justification of
Sure.
why they are poisoning the well, if you will.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, from the get-go, it's set up this way. And you know, divorce is handled the same way as a criminal case. Okay, you have to find somebody guilty. It's the prosecutor against the other side. Um, and that's really not the way it should be done, as far as I'm concerned.
I agree.
Um, Now, there is a new movement, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, called collaborative divorce.
Interesting.
It is relatively new. It's been around a couple of years now. Oh, and certainly it's nationwide.
Okay.
And I and I've spoken for them. In fact, my message to them is they need to do better marketing. So here's a good example.
Yeah, right? Totally. I had never heard of that, and I think that's really interesting. I've heard of mediators. Uh-oh, Dr. Waldman, you froze.
An
Uh-oh.
office,
There you're back.
sorry, okay, an office will have several attorneys where dad gets his attorney, mom gets her attorney in from the same office. So they get their needs, addressed, but the two attorneys are actually working in concert to do what's best for the family and what's in the best interest of the children.
I think that's amazing. That's wonderful because I really do think that divorce, the biggest victim of a divorce is the children. It always is.
Absolutely.
All right, so you mentioned earlier there are several sins when you're divorcing if you're a parent. Could you talk more about what are the other ones? So one is bad mouthing your spouse.
Well, starting, it's first off, when do you tell the kids that divorce is occurring? Uh, Again, that there's no hard and fast rules, but some things to be aware of. Just as I said, bringing them in that evening in the living room, and dad's sitting there, and mom's starting to cry, and dad's looking forlorn, and he's got a packed bag and so forth, and then he's leaving. That's a shock. Maybe a day or so before, depending on the age of the kids, of course, to let them know that mom and dad are have decided that they're going to live apart. Now, there's some important things to assure the child. One, it wasn't their fault, and kids will think so. Two, it's not because they're bad or they did anything. that they're going to be taken care of, and that just because dad is leaving or dad and mom are divorcing, dad isn't divorcing you.
Right.
So assure the child that they're going to be, taken care of. That they're not to be blaming themselves, and so forth. So those are important things. The other major sin that we didn't address is to fight in front of the kid. Oh my God! I mean, that when the child is right there and they're going at it, and so forth. I mean, again, what's the kid supposed to do?
Right.
How does that make you feel? The best mom in the world and the best dad in the world are now in combat, and what am I doing? What does that mean about me? I mean, it shakes them to the core.
Yeah.
Who's taking care of me? These people look like they're out of control. What's going to happen to me? And so on. Where are you going to live? Many times when the divorce occurs or separation occurs, they make changes in their living, and that's hard on the kid.
Yeah.
And what we try to say is at least try to stay in the same neighborhood so the kids have the same friends and can attend the same school. To have the shock of divorce and then go to the other side of the city where they don't have any friends and they're starting a new school, maybe right even in the middle of the year. Oh my goodness! So how much stress are you going to put on these kids?
Yeah.
You don't want to do that.
Well,
Um,
again, we get back to this selfishness. Like, you're doing that for you. You're not doing that for your children.
Well, yes, sometimes. So we say, the kid, ideally, here's the ideal. The parents should live within walking distance of each other. So that the kids could actually go back and forth, and so on. Same school, same friends. Now, sometimes that's not possible,
Yeah.
but that's the ideal, and so on. And that the kids could have, regular contact with each parent. The parenting plan should be flexible. If something comes up, you can ask the other parent, "Hey, could you take over?" Blah blah blah, and so on. I often recommend that exchanges are done in neutral spots instead of going to one parent's house and picking the kids up and taking them from there, to the other house, which reminds the kid, gee, I'm going from one house to another. Is make the exchange after school or at the daycare center or someplace
I think
neutral
I
like
think
that.
exchanges is probably it's got to be on your list of sins because I have heard many a horror story about the exchange becoming this awful, like for example, clothes. Like not bringing the clothes with them that they need. And then the mom's in a pickle or the dad's in a pickle because they don't have what they need to go to soccer practice and it's all this stress or asking a parent, "Hey, can you help me this weekend? I've got plans." And the other partner saying, "Tough, tough cookies. You
Right.
left me. It's not my job," right? Like,
Right. Exactly. No, you're absolutely right. No, in fact, we suggest that, let's, if that their clothes, there should be, I know it's expensive, but sets of clothes should be in both places.
yeah.
I've even recommended many times that we speak with the teacher in the school and that the school books are in both places. Let's face it, how many times do kids living in intact families, forget their book at school or this or that,
Yep.
or their homework, they misplaced their homework or whatever, and they're going crazy about it. Can you imagine now doubling that because they've got two places? Oh my God, I got this essay that's due tomorrow, but I left it at dad's. You know, the kids don't need this, of course,
Totally.
and So, so that the kid shouldn't have to pack up to go to the other parent. The clothes should be there. The
I
things
resonate
they
with
need.
that. It's adding to a child's mental burden. And if you already are separating, that's already hard enough to have an
Right,
absence of one of their main caregivers. And then
right,
on top of that, and I think a lot of parents think, like their assumption is, well, that's their responsibility, it's their stuff. And it's like, well, wait a
right,
second. If you weren't divorced, they wouldn't have to have this extra mental load.
right. Yeah. No, it's more of a burden on the parent, but again, you chose to have these kids. You guys decided to get divorced, and so it's your responsibility to make this as easy as possible. Um, the data shows that kids who come from these kinds of divorce situations and so forth are more likely to have divorces themselves. And so we don't want to do that
Yeah,
because it's going to perpetuate this process.
for sure.
Um, there are also more subtle things that parents need to be careful of. Um, you don't want to interrogate the child when he or she comes back from a visitation. Some parents do that.
Oh,
Well, they
yeah.
start, well, how was your visit with Dad?
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay. Was there anything new in Daddy's house?
What did you
Uh,
eat? Did he spend
yeah,
time with
really.
anyone?
Uh-huh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Daddy got a new TV?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, he can afford a TV, can he? Okay, and so now the kids, okay, you can see the kid going, "Ooh, what do I say?"
Yeah.
Now the father may be saying, "Don't tell your mother anything."
Oh, and
Oh,
that's the worst thing to
sure.
say to a child.
Right. And
Secrets.
then and
Oh,
then the
God.
and then of course, mother is asking. I mean, it's like, but you can't use the kid as a spy, you
Yes.
know. Please tell me if there's anything new there in Daddy's house or whatever. Um, those are those subtle games, but it still puts the kid in a vice. What do I do? Who do I listen to? Who am I loyal to? This is crazy.
It's very
My parents.
stressful.
And by the way, when they become teens, talk, teens, a normal teen thinks their parents are nuts and stupid anyhow. Okay. That just goes with the territory. Now, if you put a teen in this situation,
Oh my gosh.
he's right or she's right.
Yeah.
They're actually, and they don't put up with this. They talk about angry teenagers. I've seen them, when this crap
Oh, I'm
occurs.
sure.
Yeah,
I'm sure. Well, what
yeah.
about like the Disney parent thing? Like the parent who's always the fun parent and, oh, well, mom doesn't let us eat this. Well, you're not at mom's house. You can have whatever you want. Like, I think that's another sin that happens frequently and isn't looked as bad, but it really does create the stress for the child.
Absolutely. You're right. It's on my list. Exactly. Mom's trying to limit screen time, for instance, which is probably a good thing. And when it goes to dad's house, it's, TV all day long or screen time all day long. Mom's trying to have the kid eat a decent diet, and oh no, we're gonna burgers and hot dogs and ice cream and candy, and so and the kid, and dad's doing that, one because maybe it's easier, but two, he's really trying to be the favorite parent.
Yes.
No, there shouldn't be a favorite parent. What
Yes.
kind of crap is that? And so on. Yeah, that's not supposed to be a competition. So again, now of course the kids will gladly do that. Oh yeah, can I have candy? What kid will say, "Oh no, I can't have candy because mom thinks it's not good for my teeth."
I have to
Yeah,
stop playing video games. Mom
yeah,
doesn't allow
right.
me to do this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Of
Yeah.
course they'll do it, but or completing the homework. Um, Yeah, I had dad say, "Look, I have limited contact with my kids. I'm not going to spend time, helping him with his homework." Right. And and
Bingo.
and I would say, "Well, you have a choice." So as a parenting coordinator, if I'm appointed by the judge, I can make legal decisions. Of course, I have to clear it with the judge, but 9 times out of 10, the judge is going to agree to anything I say once they know me, and they did.
Yeah.
And so forth. And a father who would say something like that, I'd say, look, if you wanted to have your visitation with the kid, then, Sunday night, his homework needs to be done.
Yeah.
Okay. And if it's not, then you'll have to bring him home about noon on Sunday, so he will have the time to complete his homework when he's with mom. That's your decision.
Well, and think about what disservice you're doing to your children if they're learning like mom is a or dad, whatever. Let's switch the example just so that I don't sound sexist. But let's say,
Sure.
for example, dad's the unfun parent because he makes you have homework and he's making sure you're eating healthy and making sure you're going to your doctor's appointments and you're going to sleep on time. And then you go to mom's house and you can stay up late. You can play whatever you want. She doesn't care if you have access to a cell phone or whatever. Think about the disservice you're creating for this child. They're learning this black or white way of living. They're not learning the discipline of balance, right? Of a little fun, a little responsibility. They're also witnessing fighting with unhealthy extremes.
The world is crazy.
It really
That's
is.
that's what the kid comes to
Yeah.
conclude.
Yeah.
They're insecure. I mean, kids want to feel rooted. They like things to be the same. They want to know they're cared for, and there's stability in their world. And when they're caught in this kind of cyclone, it's not good for them. Kids in this situation are not going to do their homework on time, are not going to sit in class and pay good attention, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. No, their head's going to be spinning.
Yeah.
They're going to be upset, dysregulated, and so on. I mean, this is just unhealthy for them.
Yeah.
And
And I
yeah,
think it's important for people to hear this because I think that a lot of times parents are so it's not, I don't think, hold on, I'm so sorry. My cat is demanding lunch. I'm going to go lock her away so that the microphone does not pick up this cat. No, ma'am. No, ma'am. Sorry about that, Dr. Waldman.
they're not.
The curses of working from home, right?
Yeah, yeah, right. I remember a case I had where this very bright kid was near the top of his high school class, and his parents, both of whom were doctors, by the way, and should have known better, got into this terrific uh, conflicted divorce, and the kid shut down. This was his senior year. Scholarships were already,
Devastating.
becoming apparent, and so forth. And finally, they brought the kid to me, and I had a long talk with the kid. And look, I certainly I understood where he was coming from, but I basically said to him, Tom, you can't let your parents' divorce ruin your life.
Yeah.
If you can graduate near the top of your class, go to any college, in the country that you want on a scholarship, no less,
Yeah.
or not.
Right.
So he finally managed to pull it together, but
It's so hard for kids, though. They have such a limited scope of vision and a limited perspective, whereas parents, we're supposed to be these guides. But I was trying to say earlier, I think, no, I don't think any parent wakes up and says, I'm going to pit my kid against my partner and I'm going to psychologically distress my child because I'm hurting. Like, I don't think it's a conscious process. I think it's hurting people hurt people. And I think that people get lost in their own psychodramas, the things that are happening in their head, right?
Right.
So I don't think any parent wants to harm their child. I just think that people get lost in the conflict and the emotion of these situations.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree with that. It's not malicious in most
Right,
cases.
right.
Simple things like, the child is getting ready to go to the other parent, and so on, and the parent who's letting go of the child saying, "Well, I hope it's okay. I'm really going to miss you. I'm going to be lonely. I'll wait for you to come back." Now, and that may be true, but now that what's the child supposed to think? Well, I don't want this parent to feel lonely without me, and when the parent says, "I hope you'll be okay over there," like, well, wait a minute, what's dangerous
Oh
over
my
there?
gosh, yes.
And so, but again, that isn't malicious. The parent didn't say that. That's perhaps how they felt, but
Right.
you can see how that impacts the child. Now, on the reverse side, sometimes what happens, sometimes is in a divorce, because again, the person you used to speak to, the other adult, is no longer there. Sometimes parents mistakenly start using the child as a confidant.
I think that's something I see a lot of in therapeutic environments is parents treating their children as partners,
Mhm.
as therapists, as friends, and it's like your child is not your friend. They cannot hold, they don't have the mental capacity, the emotional strength, the resilience to be an equal to you. They are not your equal.
Exactly.
The best friend
Uh,
syndrome, right? Like my child's my best friend. Well, they're 16. They shouldn't be your best friend. They should be
right,
your child.
right. Well, and of course, it's very confusing. Like you said, it's a confusion of roles.
Yes.
Am I your best friend now?
Right.
But then why are you telling me to go make my bed? Just a minute. You
Yeah.
don't tell best friends to make your bed.
Yeah.
So it creates
Yeah.
lots of confusion and so on.
Or dating lives. I see that a lot too, where parents, have their kids writing their dating profiles and telling them about their dates, and that's just not appropriate. This child hasn't even learned the landscape of dating themselves.
Well, now speaking of dating, of course, that raises a whole new set of issues, because, when the other parent gets wind of the fact that, their ex or soon to be ex, um, is seeing somebody, the fur can begin to fly
Oh,
once again,
yeah.
once again. Now, one basic mistake that a lot of people make in this situation is they pair up far too quickly. Look, I understand. I get it. Somebody you once cared for has left you, rejected you. It hurts. This is a couple's world. You don't typically go to the movie alone. You don't go to a nice restaurant alone. You don't typically vacation alone. It's this you prefer to be coupled. I get that. I realize that. But so often, what happens is, uh, people rush into a new relationship, and the data is very clear. The divorce rate for first marriages in this country, it runs currently between 45 and 50%.
Wow, that's high.
Yeah, well, that's where it is, unfortunately, and it's been that way a long time. Uh, COVID made it even worse. All this togetherness
Yeah, I could
and
see
so
that.
on. But second marriages, you would think you're older, you're wiser, you should know more, blah, blah, blah. No, 65%, 2 out of 3 fail.
Wow.
And the reason for that, and part of it, is we couple too quickly.
And
Right?
you're coupling from a place of hurt and
Yes,
emptiness. You're not coupling from
yes,
a place of wholeness and
right,
togetherness, right? Like
right.
I resonate with what you're saying. I see that a lot. I also see people who couple with other people and try to shove it in the other partner's face. Like, see, I've
Sure.
moved on. And it's like, okay, good for you, but that's not why you should be in a relationship.
Yeah. And think of all the attachments you have here.
Oof.
Um, you now have a child, a confused one at that, or children. So you got stepkids and so forth. Also, you're bringing along the grandparents are coming along, and now this new person also has grandparents, and they probably would like some connection, with these new kids, and so forth. And same thing may happen on the other side as well. So come Thanksgiving, where you go for dinner, I don't know. I mean, you need you need a spreadsheet to figure it out,
Yeah.
and so on.
Well, and a lot of
But
times these kids, the family home no longer exists because it was sold or everyone moved or whatever. So it's like, where's your home? Well, there's
right,
the stepmom and her family, and then there's stepdad, and then there's mom, and it just becomes so complex. There's all of these relationships and attachments to navigate. And I think a lot of times parents see their kids acting okay and assume everything's fine. It's like, oh, well, how's your 10-year-old dealing with the divorce? Oh, they seem okay. They seem fine. And it's like, ugh, that's not the best indicator to know whether a child is psychologically healthy, is how they appear at first glance. Would you agree with that?
yeah. Well, the kid's trying to hold it together
Yeah.
best he can, or she can. Yeah. There's an interesting phenomenon, and we see it a lot where uh, a person, quickly pairs up, and you take a look at this person, and you have to do a double take because he or she actually looks a lot like the first one.
Interesting.
Yeah, we see it a lot. Well, if we take an analytic perspective here for just a moment, although typically known as a behavioral psychologist, um, but if we look at it this way, what most people do is pay little attention, okay, to their role in the dissolution of the first relationship. 99 times out of 100, if you ask that person, how come you got divorced? It's the other person's fault. Very, very, very seldom do they look in the mirror and say, well, maybe I did this or I could have done this and so on. No, it's the other person's fault. So what do? They take whatever dynamics they own, okay, that caused damage in the first relationship and throw them right into the second one immediately.
Definitely.
Okay? And that's one of the reasons why the divorce rate for second marriages is so high, because we're taking the same crap and throwing it there.
Yeah, we're ground into these unhealthy dynamics of how we relate to others, and then we just carry it. And of course, if we don't heal, we're attracting the familiar love as well.
Right.
If you're
Exactly.
attracted to a dominating critical man and you haven't healed anything about yourself, you're gonna attract a dominating critical man again the next time.
Right. Right. They say there's 4 things that trouble most relationships. Money, sex, in-laws, kids. Okay. Those are the four things that most couples struggle with. So on. Well, take a look at that. If you're coming out of a divorce, particularly a conflicted one, money. I can't tell you how many situations I've had, not professionally, where the second marriage is already in trouble because the father is paying a pocket full of child support and spousal maintenance, and the new wife or new girlfriend's going, wait a minute, a couple $1,000s a month is going out the door, and I don't even know these people. We need money here.
Right.
So you've got the money issue, the sex issue. Well, we know they've been with somebody else and so forth. In-laws, like I just said a minute ago, you've got a whole set of ex-in-laws that you still have to deal with. Stuff enough to deal with, whatever. And now the kids. You're not my real father or my real mother. Oh, God, and so on. It is tough, and so on. And that's, those are the reasons why second marriages just fail so continuously.
Okay, so let's shift gears here. What are some simple things parents can think of doing in order to foster health in their children if they're going through a divorce or they are divorced? What are some things you could do that would be positive and strengthening for the kids?
Sure, good question. Speak positively about your ex, and so on. Continue to assure them that they're going to be taken care of. They can ask any questions, that if they want to see or call their other parent, they absolutely can do that. And you'll get out of the room. They can speak, privately and so forth. If they want to go over there for something, fine. We'll drive you over. If Daddy's good at making whatever, we'll go to Daddy's house and we'll get your project done for school, and so on. Those kinds of things go a long way, to putting the kid at ease. Those are important.
That's wonderful. I think another thing that I heard from our conversation earlier is making sure you're taking care of your own feelings aside from the kid. Like, don't, you might be going through a struggle or a conflict, or you might really dislike your ex. However, you have therapists for that. You have friends for that. You have private time for that. Do not expect your kids to be supportive of your feelings towards your ex, because it's none of the kid's business, really.
Right. Well, and you just said a magic word as far as I'm concerned, therapist. I mean, this is what therapists are for.
Yes.
If you're going through a divorce, even a congenial one, and so on, I still recommend that you see a therapist, and your kids should as well. I mean, this is what it's all about. I mean, breaking up, divorce, is one of the most difficult things. It's highest on the stress scale.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it changes everything, right? It changes our day-to-day lives.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So, yeah. So, yes, seeing a supportive therapist to help you through this and the kids is very important. Yes. And again, if you're contemplating divorce, look into this collaborative approach.
I know, that sounds so cool.
As opposed to the adversarial approach.
Right.
Some of these attorneys, say, hey, I'm going to get you every dime, we can, we're going to grind him into the ground, we're going to, make him pay, and some people go, oh, that's good. Well, no, it's not good. Because, maybe you might do that and so forth. But remember, it doesn't end, when the court session ends.
Right.
You're going to have to live the rest of your life, with a very angry ex-spouse. and your kids are going to be caught in this as well. That's not how you want to, do this, and so on. I worked with lots of different divorce attorneys, and you could tell right away whether this attorney really had the kids' welfare in mind, or, as like I said, it was a shark.
Well, I hate to say this, but lawyers are not in it because they care about children's well-being. Lawyers are typically in it because they want to make money.
Yeah. Unfortunately, yes. And strife means bucks.
That's right. Yeah.
The more motions you file, more times you go into court. I mean, yeah. But again, it doesn't end well, and it's hard on the kids. By the way, don't bring your kid to court.
Oh, yes, that's a good point.
I can't tell you. There were a couple of cases that I was involved in, and nothing ticks off a judge more than to bring a child to court. Now, in a couple of instances, when the kid's a teenager, and so on, the judge might meet with the child in what they call it in camera. That is, in the judge's office, but not in open court. Then you, of course, bring the kid to court. But
they made me testify against my dad in a divorce. It was just awful, traumatizing.
Sure. Can you imagine?
No, it's awful.
But yeah, I know. I've been sitting in the back waiting for my chance. I mean, waiting to testify, and I've seen some of this, and I'm just going, oh my God, Fortunately, the judges, in Phoenix go through this so much, they've learned, they don't do that. Well, of course, I've been out of it now several years, but I certainly saw it back in the day. Yeah,
that's wonderful.
That's terrible to put a child on the stand, speaking against the other parent.
Ugh, yuck.
Yeah.
All right, Dr. Waldman, if you could give people one nugget of advice, one gem from this podcast, what are you hoping they're going to hear?
You have to put the kids' needs first. It's not maybe a message that they want to hear, but they're fragile. This is a groundbreaking event for everybody, but for kids, it is the most to lose, the best, parents in the world, and so on, is just mind rattling. So you have to take care of their needs first.
So there you have it, what not to do in divorce and better ways to protect your kids from emotional fallout. If you're an adult child of a divorce and you want support unpacking the effects of a dysfunctional upbringing and learning how to show up differently in your own life and relationships, head over to KaylaRiley.com. I'd love to work with you. I offer one-on-one coaching and it would be awesome. Check it out. You can also check out Dr. Waldman's book, Love Your Child More Than You Hate Your Ex, What Every Divorced Parent Needs to Know. It's available now on Amazon and honestly required reading if you're navigating divorce with kids in the mix. You can connect with Dr. Waldman on LinkedIn. He's semi-retired now, so when he's not chilling by the pool, maybe he'll write you back. And if you haven't already connected with me on Instagram, please hop on over there. I'm notyourtherapist.Kayla. I want to hear what you think about this episode and what came up for you. Thanks for hanging out with me. Take care of yourself and your kids, and I'll catch you next time on Not Your Therapist.